Welcome into another hour of CBS Sports HQ. Jeremy St. Louis alongside Chris Hassel to kick off your working week. Week 2 of the NFL preseason wrapping up tonight. Falcons and the Jets. That's going to be a barn burner. And just 1 week of the preseason left.
Just one left, yeah.
Our training camp tour is up north this week.
Yeah, our Pete Prisco and Bryant McFadden with the Vikings today and tomorrow. They made somewhat of a surprising trade today. More on that in a moment as Tommy Tran tees up a new beginning for the Vikings this season.
For a second consecutive season, the Minnesota Vikings finished under 500 and out of the playoffs. And with that, Mike Zimmer was dismissed as head coach after 8 seasons on the job. To replace him, Vikings brass tapped into the Sean McVay coaching tree, with former Rams offensive coordinator Kevin O'Connell getting his first crack at being a head coach.
The good thing is I believe wholeheartedly that I'm ready for this opportunity. I believe from a fundamental standpoint of teaching the systems that I want to run in all 3 phases will be incredibly competitive.
Kirk Cousins had arguably the best season of his career last year, but could potentially post even better numbers this season playing for an offensive-minded head coach.
When you're coachable and you learn it the way they want it, that's when you have the most success because they're really setting up the whole plan to build off of those coaching pieces.
While the Cousins-O'Connell working relationship is still being developed, one already sure thing is wide receiver Justin Jefferson, who has been unstoppable in his first 2 seasons and could just be scratching the surface with a more dynamic offensive game plan.
I'm not labeled as the best receiver at this point, so that's my motivation, is just becoming the best receiver.
On the defensive side of the ball, they signed Zadarius Smith in free agency to upgrade the pass rush, and in the draft, the focus was on the secondary, with Vikings selecting safety Lewis Seen in the first round, and then coming back with cornerback Andrew Booth Jr. in round 2. Will the offseason additions be the upgrades the Vikings need to take the NFC North from the grasp of the Packers, or are they still a notch below their arch rivals? A new chapter is about to kick off in the Twin Cities.
Pete Prisco and Bryant McFadden are out there at Vikings camp. Pete, where are the Vikings right now? We've seen 2 preseason games, but we haven't seen much from the team, haven't seen anything from Kirk Cousins, who has not played in either game.
It's hard to evaluate them because based on preseason, but when, it's all about practice. We get too caught up in the preseason numbers and who's doing what in the preseason. It's about practice, and the reports are they've been very good in practice. And this is going to be an explosive offense. I think Kirk Cousins, at times, I've been very critical of him. I think he has to prove to people he can win in the big moments and make the plays in the big moments. He hasn't always done that, but he's going to put up monster numbers in this offense with Kevin O'Connell. This is a different team. I've known Mike Zimmer for years. Mike Zimmer is rigid. Mike Zimmer can wear on people, and I think it got a little stale around here. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a good thing that they made the change, and they get a young offensive mind in here.
Yeah, for the Vikings right now, they finally got that new iPhone update. You talked about having Coach Zimmer here for such a long time. They were kind of very, very generic, especially on the offensive side of things. Didn't do things that other offenses were doing in the National Football League. And in comes Kevin O'Connell, and they got a new update. And with that being said, I'm right there with you, Pete. I think this offense will be very, very explosive. They will be very, very entertaining. Kirk Cousins did some real good things last year. They just couldn't finish the deal. They lost so many games late in the fourth quarters a year ago, and that kind of put an emphasis on what's going on. But Kirk Cousins did pretty well when you look at his individual numbers. Now, fast forward to this season with what they have already in place offensively, the skill guys. One of the best wide receivers in the game, a reliable number 2, an up-and-coming number 3 in K.J. Osborne. If Irv Smith Jr. is healthy, he's a reliable pass catcher at the tight end spot and one of the best running backs in the game. They just got to keep the offensive line healthy. But everything is in place for Captain Kirk to put on his cape and do what he's been called to do.
We know Pete Prisco as a Kirk Cousins hater. He walks around here in South Florida and says whatever the hell he wants about Cousins. BMac, does he kind of tone that down a bit when Kirk Cousins might be within shouting distance there in Minnesota?
Well, Chris, he hasn't quite toned it down just yet, but Kirk is not out here. And it's my job to find a way to get Kirk Cousins and Pete Prisco together so we can figure out what is what with this guy. Because, yes, you're right. He's been very, very critical of Captain Kirk. But let's see if he will be critical of Captain Kirk if we can get Kirk Cousins
I
right
tell
here.
him, you got to make plays at a big moment, buddy, before anybody gives you the credit you deserve. He puts up big numbers. Nobody's going to argue that. And, oh, by the way, you guys are doing a podcast with one of his teammates, and I didn't see him on the request form to come over and be part of the interview process.
We're going to change that. We're going to get that.
One of his teammates didn't ask for him on the interview process.
We're going to change that, Chris. We're going to try to make that happen.
You throw me under the bus, I can throw everybody else right on.
Yeah, I want to see Pete talk to Kirk Cousins and call him buddy and see how that goes. Hey, you mentioned the new head coach, Kevin O'Connell, and what he can do with the weapons on this offense. BMac, what specifically do you think we're going to see from O'Connell as he tunes up this offense?
A lot of misdirection. When you look at what the Rams have been doing for such a long time, the play action has been huge for their success on the offensive side of things. And when you have a guy like Dalvin Cook, who's already a guy you want to highlight as a defender when you're playing against Minnesota, that play action could be a very, very, very deadly asset to what they can do. And then when you get guys in space like Justin Jefferson, KJ Osborne, Adam Thielen along with that play action, man, Matthew Stafford benefited a lot from the play action passes. When you look at some of the outstanding quarterbacks who do numbers, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, guys like that, they utilize the play action as their best friend. So that's something that I expect to see a lot with a Kevin O'Connell-led offense. Play action has to be their best friend.
But you remember, when Matt Stafford came, they evolved that offense a little bit because that wasn't what he did well, and so they evolved. So I think this offense will be more of a hybrid. I think because Kirk Cousins can move a little bit and throw on the run. He's done it in the past, but I think there's going to be more chunk plays down the field from the pocket with Kevin O'Connell in this offense. And the guys have been raving about it all summer, about how many big plays are getting down the field in the passing game. That's why Jefferson is going to have a monster year this year.
Speaking of Jefferson, Pete, I'm sure you saw the reports from last week that he was actually lined up in the backfield and running routes out of the backfield. You're going to see them in practice later on this afternoon and evening. What do you think about those reports?
Well, I think it's getting creative, and that's, you want to create mismatches. Whenever you can create a mismatch, whether he's in the backfield, whether he's lined up in the slot, you move him around, you get him in one-on-one opportunities. At least you try to, because teams are going to double him. If you line him up wide all the time, he's going to get doubled all the time. So move him around, create the mismatch, and that's what Kevin O'Connell will bring to this offense. Remember, go back to Zimmer. Zimmer was a defensive coach. He wanted to play great defense and run the ball and keep the score low. Kevin O'Connell isn't that guy. He's an offensive guy who wants to throw the football.
That's part of that iPhone update I was referring to. Now we're seeing different things. You put in your best pass.
Apparently, we need to update our iPhone.
Apparently.
We lost Pete Prisco
They were just
and
getting
Bryant
into
McFadden for the time being. Justin Jefferson is one of the favorites, actually a co-favorite, with Cooper Kupp to lead the NFL in receiving yards. Last season, he was second only to Kupp. Noah, just let me know if and when we reestablish connection with the fellas up there in Minnesota. All Things Covered is going to have a live podcast today, 5:30 Eastern Time.
But not with Kirk Cousins.
Not as of now. Patrick Peterson and BMac going to be together in Minnesota. Peterson entering his second season with the Vikings. And as of now on the request list, no Kirk Cousins, but BMac says he might change that.